Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to be getting started in just a minute here. I'm going to let our platform allow everyone in, but in the meantime, you'll notice as you join, your cameras are automatically off, your microphones are automatically muted. They'll stay that way throughout today's session, but we do encourage you to use the chat today to ask questions, make comments, insert resources. You can hop over to the chat if you'd like as you're joining. Give us a greeting and let us know where you're tuning in from today. I always love to see where everyone's joining us from. Hello, hello. For those of you just joining, we'll be started in a couple minutes here. We're just giving everyone some time to join. I see those greetings coming through. It looks like we have folks from all over per usual, which is just so fun to see. Hi, everyone. Amazing. Good, good, good. Well, I see our numbers are slowing down a little bit here, and we have so much to talk about today. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, Holding On for Others, Caregiving, Chronic Illness, and Self-Care. My name is Jackie Zimmerman. I'm the Manager of Public Education Partnerships and E-Learning at Mental Health America's National Office, and I'll be moderating today's panel discussion. Just a few notes before our speakers introduce themselves. This webinar is being recorded and will be emailed out to all registrants within 1 week. We currently do not offer CEUs, but we can provide you with a certificate of attendance. If you'd like to request one of those, I'll put the link in the chat here shortly, and that link will also be included in your follow-up email if you're not able to access it during this time. I want to give a special thank you to the National Pancreas Foundation for their partnership in this series that we have done on mental health and chronic health conditions, really making that connection, bringing awareness and providing resources for everyone. We are joined by some incredible individuals today for this session. Nicole, Mark, and Chris, we are so grateful to have you here with us today. Before we get started into our discussion, I would love for each of you to briefly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your connection to this topic we have today. And Mark and Chris, I can have you all go first if you'd like.
There you go. My name is Chris Goldstein, and I've been married to Mark for 43 years. We've had a very exciting life together. We met in college and started our careers in Boston, me as a physical therapist and he as a veterinarian. And we have 2 daughters, a great son-in-law, and 2 wonderful grandchildren. I worked as a physical therapist for 42 years, mostly in home care, and I retired 2 years ago. Mark had a diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis a little more than a decade ago, which started, a different role for us as caregiver and caregiving. And also a diagnosis of pancreatic cancer, and which occurred just 1 week after I retired from physical therapy. So I'll let you go.
Oh, my turn. Hi, I'm Mark Goldstein. I guess I'm either the victim, the patient, or also a caregiver to myself. And I also think of myself as a caregiver to Chris. She needs support also. And as Chris mentioned, rheumatoid arthritis 10 years ago, chronic pain has been an issue for us to deal with. And then I was lucky enough to hit the lottery, as my surgeon said. I had 2 tumors in my pancreas. One was a bit more benign. And then 3 years later, I was diagnosed with pancreatic adenocarcinoma. I'm lucky to be here. I mean, that's the best thing I can say. I am now 30 months post-diagnosis. I know how fortunate I am for so many reasons. As Chris mentioned, our family, our friends, our support network, where we live in San Diego. You see the backdrop. This is real. It's not fake. So we do. And I guess mindfulness, I'll mention, is really helpful to get through all of this on everybody's part. And I take every day. For me, it's my garden that you hear in the background, possibly, and the friends that call, and but my connection is the disease. And I had the opportunity. I also want to thank Mental Health and Jackie and Salkfold and the Pancreatic Foundation for allowing us this opportunity, because I also feel like I had to have purpose after something like this happens. And this gives us purpose. So thank you for listening to us. I hope you're using your time or using it wisely. That's our connection.
Thank you, Mark and Chris. We're so grateful to have you here today.
My name is Nicole Goebel. I'm in Washington, D.C., and I work with the Caregiver Action Network. I'm the Director of Community Initiatives, and I've been with the organization for 7 years. So we provide lots of resources and information and support for the over 90 million family caregivers in the U.S. You know, we're talking about caregivers across the lifespan. So caring for a partner that's been diagnosed with cancer, caring for a child that's been born with a disability or a chronic condition, to caring for an older or aging loved one. In addition to that, I am also a long distance caregiver. My mother has advanced COPD. So she's in Iowa, and so we have lots of video calls and check-ins, and I kind of manage our care team there. I'm also someone that was born with a rare disease. So just like I am her long distance caregiver, she will certainly tell you that she is my long distance caregiver as well. So, you know, so I guess that's I'm kind of multi-connected to this topic in a lot of ways, as I think Chris and Mark are as well.
Thank you, Nicole. I know that everyone is really grateful that you're able to all be here today and share your experiences, your knowledge on this topic, and just any support and advice that you can provide. So thank you all. We'll jump right into it. We know that living with a chronic health condition is exhausting, not just physically, but mentally, as we're here, to talk about the mental health impacts of physical diseases. How has your mental health been impacted through the process of getting a diagnosis, receiving treatment, and then being in recovery?
Well, I guess it's shocking. I'm a veterinarian. I was actually a veterinary oncologist the first 10 years of my career. So I know enough to be dangerous to myself. But you'll even hear this adage: nurses and doctors make terrible patients. We also always are in denial. We never get sick, we think. So when it was finally diagnosed, it was sort of like, wow, I am mortal. And, we talk about mental health, and I would put in there mental and emotional, because that has probably been the biggest challenge other than the disease itself. It hurts me. You heard Chris say she worked as a physical therapist for 42 years. 20,000 patients, 19,500 days, and she retires and then gets a permanent patient. It's just not fair. So you go through things like that. There's guilt that comes with it. So it's affected me. I had survivor's guilt. 5 of our friends were diagnosed at the same time as I was with various forms of cancer: prostate, glioblastoma in the brain. Another friend, Chris's roommate, pancreatic cancer. All of them are gone, except for me. And it's surprising. You get survivor's guilt. I say these things because I hope people listening, whether you're a caregiver or the patient, you're not alone. You're not crazy when you go through things like that. And, that's where you reach out to someone, whether it's a counselor or a friend or a loved one. So, yeah, the emotional mental health has been trying. I'd leave one last point, just so we're real. 43 years married. Honestly, this is probably the toughest time for us. Because up until now, we're on the same page. We're bringing each other along through life. We trusted. We had the same dreams. We had the same aspirations. And suddenly, I have to look a year or two out, and Chris appropriately looks 20 years out. I hope she can. So suddenly, we're having to find 2 different worlds and put them back together. and it's challenging. I can offer solutions a little bit later, but I thought I'd just put the challenge on the table and let everybody know you're not nuts if you're going through some of these emotions. We all,
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, and I would just add, I think, coming from a patient perspective, I was diagnosed at birth, so I know that both for patients and their family caregivers, the diagnostic process can be really, really stressful, and really anxiety inducing, especially if you're kind of waiting for answers, undergoing lots of tests, and that can have a real impact and be very draining and exhausting. Then when you get to the treatment and therapy section, that's kind of a whole other ball of anxiety and stress and juggling and making it all work. I think having a rare disease, having it since birth, I think there's also just, a lot of difficulties, day to day difficulties that come with my condition. And at a certain point, you just feel tired. You feel like you're constantly kind of fighting. And you have to really muster up as much strength as you can to kind of keep going sometimes. And I think that that's a really real, I think, feeling that can be hard to voice for folks, but I think it is important to put voice to it, because I think it's something that a lot of people can relate to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. Um, I know just in our experience with MHA, we've partnered with NPF and talked to a lot of folks who are going through the process. And like you said, that diagnostic stage can be so stressful. And that's what we've heard from a lot of pancreatitis patients too, is just they were constantly turned away or not believed about the pain they were experiencing or the symptoms. And it took so long to get that diagnosis. So that can be a real struggle and a real mental drain on top of the physical exhaustion that you're experiencing. It's a whole other mental load that you have to carry on top of that. So thank you for bringing that up. I want to hear each of you from your experience, then vice versa. It was great to hear, from the patient perspective of what that's like going through. But as a caregiver, how has your mental health impacted as you've taken on this unique role and now continue to provide care for someone else?
I'm probably going to do some reading here because I'm not as accomplished a speaker as Mark is, and I want to make sure I get all the points. At first, your world is turned upside down. All the dreams that you had about the future and being together in old age are forgotten, and you're laser focused on getting the right medical care so that you can have the person that you love around for as long as possible. It's not easy to see your partner in life in pain, and I have to remember that I'm not responsible for his pain. Many times I would not want Mark to fix things in the house because I thought it would make his pain worse, but he would tell me that the distraction from fixing something would also make him forget about his pain. So that was important too, distraction from pain. You need to let your partner or family member, whoever you're taking care of, have some control over their lives, because they feel like they don't have control because of the disease. And if the person you're caring for reaches a point where they require less care, which I'm lucky, I know, because Mark has been 2 years cancer free. I think it's important for the caregiver to take some time for themselves and do things to improve your physical and mental health. For me, that was swimming, yoga, functional strength training class, and getting a therapist to talk to.
I would add on to that. Um, you come up with some, not tricks, but some rules maybe that you keep repeating to yourself and you try to live by them and you can't every day. It starts with, we've all probably experienced this in our various forms of life, but especially if we've gone through things like Nicole and I am, you find out who your friends are. Some people say that's not really it. You find out what different people's abilities are. And those friends that stop calling, don't think harsh of them, because it might be that syndrome of I don't know what to say. And you want to say to them, you don't have to say anything, just be there. But I learned late in life to more measure people by their intention and not their actions. So, just because somebody may be acting out to me, or I hope I'm acting out to them, they look at that and say, wait, what's his intention? It's not to hurt me, it's to help, but maybe he just doesn't know how to do it, or Chris to me. So one thing I would say in stress is when those tough interactions happen between people, think of what their intention is before you judge. And I can't tell you how important it's been to have friends like that. And, then also when it gets tense, the golden rule, one of them, and these two things will be available, I'm told, when the video comes out. So you don't have to scribble them down. And that's when things get tense and you're about to say something. My counselor, Kathy Kubo, who I'm having lunch with right after this because I want to debrief. She brought to my attention, ask yourself, first of all, if what you're about to say to your partner or your caregiver or you're going to say to the patient, is it true? Is it necessary to say? Make sure it's not you just want to get something off your chest. And is it going to be constructive or at least helpful? And if it's no to any of those, you might want to hold it back. Now, can I do that all the time? Absolutely not. I grew up in a family that confronted things right on. But yeah, is it true? Is it necessary? And will it be helpful? Has helped in the communication aspect. Just one of the things that's helped with dealing with it.
I think from a caregiver perspective, going back to what we mentioned at the top about the anxiety and stress just around, I think, navigating some of the day-to-day tasks. I think two things that I think is a particular struggle for family caregivers is that, one, family caregivers can sometimes feel like they lose themselves in their role as a caregiver. They become kind of consumed. The loved one that they're caring for, they have another relationship with them, another dynamic. And it can feel like that gets kind of shoved off to the side. And you're just now caregiver, care recipient, or patient. And I think that that's really challenging, both in terms of communication, but also I think from a mental health aspect, because it's losing a piece of your identity in a lot of ways. I think just in general too, kind of part of that is in kind of losing yourself in the role of caregiver. We will often neglect our own physical and mental health. We won't go to doctor's appointments because our loved one needs to go to doctor's appointments. We won't be taking care of ourselves the way that we know that we should, because we have prioritized, these other aspects of life now that we're a caregiver. And I know it sounds very, very cliche to say, but going back to that airplane analogy of like when the oxygen mask comes down, you have to put it on yourself first before you can help someone else. We hear that, but I think it's often lost of why, which is that if you need to have oxygen in order to support other people, to make sure that their mask is on, because you can pass out in a situation like that. So I think it's really in talking to family caregivers, always telling them to check in with yourselves, see how you're doing. If stress and anxiety and all these things may be part of the role. But if they become too difficult in managing, it's time to seek some help, to get some intervention, because we can't do it all on our own and we need help too.
I can give an illustration that summarizes what Nicole said. You're right on point. And at the I'm going to share, Chris is a spectacular physical therapist, but my lover and my wife also. And there was a moment in time where I was in the bathroom at 3 o'clock in the morning, looking in the mirror, asking, should I take another opioid or not for the pain? And what I hear behind me is, you have your cane in the wrong hand. At 3 o'clock in the morning, what I was going through, what I wanted was my wife, but she was very right, by the way. I did have the cane in the wrong hand. And as a physical therapist, she wanted to look out for my best interest. But that was sort of like, we laugh at it now, but at the moment, we both got very terse. I turned and said, Chris, I want a wife right now, not a physical therapist. And, I was basically telling her, don't be who you were for 40 years. That's not right. So that's where you clash, and you both have the right intention. So yeah, it summarizes what you're saying, Nicole. It's hard to play those two roles and find, well, when do you want one and when do you want and when do you the other?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Mark and Chris, and that story. And thank you, Nicole. It kind of, a lot of things you've already been bringing up address this question, but I want to dive a little bit deeper into it of what are some of those unique challenges that caregivers face that put that extra strain on their mental health, as you're caregiving for a loved one or someone that is outside of, like you said, your professional and your professional role.
I think this is true of most people who are challenged with a diagnosis like cancer. Mark had a 60-pound weight loss with his diagnosis. It was difficult for him to look at himself in the mirror, and he tried to hide the weight loss by putting on layers of clothes, and he didn't want me to see him without clothes on. And I mean, I was just happy to have him around and wanted to keep him around. That didn't matter as much to me, but I could see being the patient where it would probably bother me. My challenge with that was, we need to put weight on. What are we going to do? And at the same time, he was having the effects of chemotherapy and change in taste for food, lack of appetite, things like that. And so one of the things we did was we made a journal of what he was eating, so that, because you don't always remember what you had the day before, if it's on paper, and then we would make notes about the calories and also the nutritional value of the food, so that we had a journal there that we could refer to and say, okay, we didn't eat enough that day, or we didn't do this right, so we could correct that. So I just wanted to share that with people because I think that was really helpful to us. It was a challenge for me when he didn't like chicken anymore, because chicken was like 50% of the recipes that I made. So I
grew up in a Jewish household. Chicken soup was penicillin, and I don't like it anymore. The chemotherapy changed my taste buds.
So you need to be creative, and we came up with new recipes, and we're always coming up with new recipes because it continues to change his tastes and problems with swallowing. That was another thing. So the consistency of the food, things like that. What else? Oh, I wanted to share that he was prescribed dronabinol, which is a synthetic form of THC. It was so helpful to him for, it helped with lack of appetite. It helped with insomnia. It helped with, what was the other one?
Nauseousness.
Nauseousness. It helped a lot. And we also sometimes would just, use pot because it's legal in California. Instead of sharing a bottle of wine, share a joint, because it was helpful to all of the symptoms that he had. So, and I wanted to share that also. Insomnia was another problem that Mark has had with both rheumatoid and pancreatic cancers. And that was a very difficult one too, because I need my sleep and he was up at night and he would feel very alone. And I would try to say, I have to have this sleep. You know, I can't not have it. I wouldn't be any good for you the next day. So we've kind of worked that out too. We're still working
Trying
that out. Oh, and then our experience with COVID and the pandemic helped a little bit because that introduced us to Zoom and FaceTime more. You know, we got very comfortable using it, and to this day we still use it. If, you know, he's not feeling up to something socially, then we can always do a Zoom call, like with family or something.
I would, just so people listening, we realize we're talking to people from all over the country, maybe possibly outside the country, and there are different laws regarding marijuana and THC. And I am a strong proponent because it has kept my opioid dose basically non-existent, whereas it was getting out of hand 10 years ago. And so we are responsible about it. And yes, I wish our government would take it out of a Schedule I drug, because most of what we know is anecdotal. But don't be afraid to explore that avenue if it's open to you, if it's legal, if your doctors are in agreement with it. As Chris said, we don't hide the fact at night, you know, the pancreas doesn't like alcohol. Anyone with pancreatic disease or pancreatic cancer knows that. So, you know, that's basically gone from my existence, and that's okay. But you look for things to socially relax you. And so we found that. Be responsible about it, be careful. But I really would tell you it was extremely helpful in that respect. And the sleeping is an issue. See, I feel my best at midnight. And for anyone listening, whether you're a caregiver or a patient, the hardest time is when you're alone. When you have distractions, you're okay. If you're by yourself, it's dark, nobody to call, it's hard. And maybe you might want to have someone you can call at that point, maybe in a different time zone, so you don't have to wake them up. But yes, that is a real challenge still for us.
I love what Mark and Chris have shared, and I think it does, I think, perfectly illustrate what I think some of those unique challenges for family caregivers, care partners, you know, what they experience. I think also one of the real pain points that family caregivers experience is loneliness and isolation. Even though, you know, there are over 90 million family caregivers in the US, you feel like you're alone in your journey because every one of those 90 million family caregivers are experiencing something unique. Their caregiving situation is unique. And I think that there's also a lot of things that family caregivers feel, these complex emotions. You know, not only is taking care of someone hard work, but it can spur a lot of challenging emotions, anger, resentment. These are natural and normal feelings to have when you're kind of in the throes of caregiving. But who do you share those feelings with? You don't want to share them with your loved one because you don't want to upset them. So it's important to have kind of like a network of support. Specifically, you know, other family caregivers, because those are individuals that you can kind of connect with as peers and be able to know that in sharing these things, these are folks that kind of understand what you're going through in a very specific way. And so you don't have to feel like, oh, if I say that I'm angry because I had to cancel all of, you know, these plans because I had to be with my mom in the hospital, or again, it's just that sense of camaraderie and understanding, and not feeling like you're going to be judged for feeling that. And they're going to be able to tell you, hey, I felt that and here's what I did. I love that. I think earlier Mark shared kind of his tool in communication, and it's very much that, like, okay. Being able to share with each other, like, this is what's worked for me as well. So having that connection, that network of support, I think is so important.
Thank you, Nicole. And thank you, Mark and Chris. Oh, Mark, I think you're on mute. There you go.
Nicole, that was very well said. And a word of caution when you seek out those sources. And Chris and I had, this is probably one of our most difficult things to work through, is I have a couple of friends that have reached out to me. I have one, God, this is hard. He calls 3-4 times a week, has for 2 years. Since the diagnosis, just how are you? And we don't take, hey, I can't talk now, goodbye, no problem, And Ira, if you're listening, you know who I'm talking about there. And I've got some other friends that as soon as I got the diagnosis, they flew out here from the East Coast, one of them giving up their Christmas. So we decorated their room like Christmas. First time I've done that in my life. But we loved sharing that. Everybody will act in a different manner, but the caution is, if you seek out a confidant and it's a friend that you both have, it endangers that relationship. Now, again, Chris and I have somewhat of a different opinion about that. But there are friends of ours now that I'm not comfortable, because I know she's confided in them and about my foibles and challenges, and it's just awkward for me. And again, this is where we'll give you both sides and both opinions and see what works for you. But I would at least caution you, seek out people that you don't both find strength from, to really put your heart into it. And I think what Nicole said is also, it's like, now I'm talking to women and I'm being not a woman. I have no idea what I'm saying here, but a woman gets pregnant and everybody's got an opinion to give them. And it's often the worst story they've ever heard. Oh, my friend that, make sure that the source of information is coming from people like Nicole and mental health, or from the National Pancreatic Foundation, or from the Caregivers Organization. The three of you are angels for what you do. But make sure that your source of information, especially in this day of over information, is solid and not making more problems for the relationship that you might have between you and your partner, your caregiver. And the last point there is, we shouldn't lose sight. If you're having an especially hard time now, between the politics of our country, the politics of the world, the pandemic, all of these things, a perfect storm. The issues we're talking about today are challenging in life. You throw in all of the rest, it's a difficult time, but you can make it through it. I want to say, with all I'm saying, again, I'll have that moment of mindfulness. Look for a way you can laugh. Look for a way you can find something good. When I have a second here, I'll let someone else speak, but I'll talk about grapes, in a second, how that helps. I'll keep going.
Thank you, Mark.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective, and you bring up such a good point of navigating with your partner, who are your confidants and what makes each of you feel most comfortable, but making sure you each have support and have those people that you really need to go to. And there might be disagreements and it might be challenging to figure out at first. And it's navigating a whole new side of friendships and relationships. But that support nonetheless can be so impactful and so important. So for everyone listening, who are some of those supporters, who are making those phone calls, who are doing the check-ins, who are being there as resources, as caregivers in your own way for these individuals in your life, thank you for doing that. I want to talk a little bit about some strategies, some tips, and some experiences you all have had as caregivers when it comes to balancing caring for others. And we've kind of mentioned this, and I've seen some comments in the chat of, as a caregiver, sometimes I forget to eat, or, I am so caught up in caregiving that I'm not remembering to do the things for myself that I'm telling someone else to do, maybe. So I'd just love to hear from your perspective of how we as individuals can balance caring for others while also prioritizing our own mental and physical and emotional health?
I think a huge part of that is, being part of a care team. Again, as a caregiver, you can't do everything on your own. And I think that it's a challenge that is so hard to navigate because we want to be able to do everything. We feel like we're falling short or we're failing as a caregiver. We're failing in support of our loved one if we're not able to do every little thing. So it is so important to be part of a care team and have, be it other family members, friends that can pitch in and provide some help when you need it. It can be little things like I need some help with going back and forth to medical appointments. Or I need someone that can run a few errands for me because I have to do this. Relying on a good network of that support, I think, is a good way to be able to find that balance. We talk about the need of respite care, which is having someone, especially if your loved one has some pretty significant care needs, having someone, again, part of that care team, it can be friends, family, or if your loved one has some medical needs, could be someone that is like a paid in-home nurse, things like that, that can, come in for a couple of hours as needed and give you a break, allow you to, do what you need to do to recharge. I always try to say that we can't be on 24/7, that we do need a break. We do need to recharge from time to time, but caregiving is kind of a 24/7 role because it happens around the clock. So it's so crucial that when you have that opportunity to take those breaks, to recharge, to rejuvenate, and just have some time to yourself, that you take it. Because otherwise you are just going to get to that point of caregiver burnout a lot sooner. And that's not a good place to be.
So I first became familiar with the National Pancreatic Foundation in Sioux Falls when I was honored to be asked to speak at a symposium with about 150 doctors, all pancreatic specialists who are thinking of going into that field. And in putting that talk together, I had an epiphany, which really has helped me. And that's I realized that when I got the diagnosis, we got the diagnosis. Yes, I did turn to Chris at that point and say, Chris, if this is the last chapter, I'm okay. I haven't left any major things on the table. I have no major regrets in life. I have a healthy family. I'm going to keep fighting, but I'm okay. But that was quickly replaced with something else, which I didn't realize for 2 years. And that's most of us listening, I think, know the stages of grieving that Kubler-Ross identified. And, we think of grieving as losing a loved one, or maybe losing even something material. But losing your plans for the future that get vaporized when you hear the diagnosis, you go into grieving. And if you think about those things, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, you go back and forth like a pinball. We have for 2 years. When you've lost a loved one, God forbid, if I lost Chris, people would give me a break if I came to a party and started crying. Now, if I come and I'm crying or I'm late, what's going on, Mark? Come on. I'm going through the same emotions. And in this case, you do eventually replace the lost feelings. Grieving is temporary, love is forever. Not when you have a terminal illness and you're still alive. You're constantly grieving, and you have to just come into grips with that, recognize it, and One of the things that I was able to use was, it came out of my counseling. When I first got the diagnosis, I sought out a counselor because I thought, statistically speaking, I've got 8 to 10 months. I was fortunate. Whipple was successful. I recovered. But out of that discussion with that psychologist came this grapes. And again, this will be made available to you. It's GRAPE. And G is first, just gentle on yourself. Be kind to yourself. You know, it's so easy. Like Nicole said, when you realize you wake up every morning, hey, it's not getting better. It's going to always be here. Well, then pat yourself on the back. What did you do? And, you know, re-energize yourself. Come up with a challenge. I'm going to put in a big plea for technology, folks. For me, at least, my friends laugh because you can walk in our house and tell Alexa or Siri to do almost anything. They think it's all toys. You know, when it's painful to get out of the chair, when you just don't get out of bed and you can say, Alexa, turn the lights on, or Alexa, turn the TV on, it's a godsend. So yes, there's all kinds of challenges with that, but I would have people really think about, what did Zoom do for us during the pandemic? It saved a lot of us, saved relationships because we at least were able to communicate. That's true for all of these technologies. Yes, they can be abused, they can be misused. You know, you can fall victim to them. Do it wisely. We happen to be fortunate with a Tesla. I let it do most of my self-driving. I'm careful. I'm always on, but boy, it helps. And you know, when you think about it, when autonomous driving really becomes a reality, and it's not yet, there's a whole generation of senior citizens that will get their freedom back. Technology can help, it can hurt. See of where it helps. So gentle on yourself, re-energize yourself. For me, it was technology. The A part is accomplish a task. Comes from a strange place to some maybe, but Admiral McCracken, I have great admiration for. He was in charge of the special forces when we got Osama bin Laden. He wrote a book called Make Your Bed. Here was a SEAL for 25 years, Navy SEAL. And he talks about the first thing you do when you get up in the morning is make your bed. Why? Because you completed a task. You pat yourself on the back and go on to the next one. Accomplish something, in other words. Finish something. Be pleasant at all times to everyone you speak to. Am I always? No. One of the things that I've gotten great strength out of, purpose, is thanking wait staff, service staff, FedEx, UPS people. I ask their name and I use their name and I say, thank you for your work. It's important. When they smile, I selfishly get energy. It makes me have a purpose just to be pleasant to myself and everybody else. The E, Chris will say I'm a heretic because it's exercise, because I'm terrible at it, because it hurts. I'm married to a physical therapist. My younger daughter is an accomplished personal trainer. My older daughter is a very accomplished yoga practitioner. And here I am. I hate the gym. But you do have to find something. For me, it's building things in my backyard. And the last S, socialize. Make someone else's day better. Make somebody laugh. It's easy to become introverted. And people who know me most of my career and what I've done, knowing me as an extrovert, I've become introverted. It's probably somewhat depression. And it's also because I just have wanted to simplify my life. So gentle on yourself, re-energize yourself, and be pleasant at all times, exercise, and make somebody laugh. And I try to practice this.
I wanted to just talk about the balance of caregiving while caring for other people. For me, exercise was really important because I think it's important to maintain good health, and hence my decision to become a physical therapist. So when we would go for chemotherapy sessions, which were 6 hours long every 2 weeks, we'd go together and Mark would take his electronic devices and he'd be happy, writing and reading. And I would take my yoga mat and my iPad and do yoga workouts to pass the time. And
the nurses came in to watch her do this, by the way.
Yeah, it was very popular among the people there at Kaiser. Then when we came home after the Whipple procedure, it was, how am I going to exercise now? Because I really had to be there all the time. And so I did yoga on the television. I would airplay it to the TV from my iPad, but you could do it right from TV. And it was very good. I learned a lot in yoga just from that. And then when I could leave for short periods, when he was feeling better, then I joined a functional strength training class that my daughter ran. My daughter's a personal trainer, both to support her and for the social interaction. It was great. And then now I've been swimming and taking classes at our local fitness club in addition to that. So I feel like, I'm much more balanced now that I can do those things also.
I would just add, we feel for people, we realize how the resources we have, we're lucky. And there's probably many people listening here who have to keep working and yet balance all of this. And I feel for you. I mean, it's hard, but find some moments to laugh and just, try and be creative with whatever resources you have.
There's one more thing, and I'm not sure we're in agreement with this, but I think it's important to remove yourself from the situation for just a short period of time, a couple days to a week, maybe twice a year. That's what I've been able to do this year. I go and visit my parents, who I'm lucky to have at 89 and 90. And it just gives you a whole different perspective to leave the situation and come back. I think it's helpful.
Oh, I'm total agreement. I wasn't initially because I was jealous of my time with Chris, but absolutely makes sense. If anybody's looking, by the way, to put a smile on someone's face, my sister-in-law, Pam, I was a brown and black socks guy in my career. And when I got the diagnosis, a carton showed up and it was all kinds of crazy socks, animal socks. I wrote a book, Lions and Tigers and Hamsters, by the way, during this period of 10 years that I've been ill. And sorry for the plea, or advertisement, but if you want to know more about our life, it's really our life story. It's Lions and Tigers and Hamsters. It's on Amazon. But she sent me a box of crazy socks. And every morning I got up and put them on and I put a smile on my face. So if you're looking for something inexpensive, want to make someone's day, send them a box of nutty socks. And, tell them to come out of their shell, because I was certainly in one, and it just put a smile on my face.
I love it. I love it. There are so many great nuggets that both Nicole, Mark, and Chris, you all provided us there of just ways to remember to take care of yourself. And I appreciate that, Mark, recognizing that everyone has different resources, different time and ability, and constraints. And that can be really challenging too as caregivers of you want to take time for yourself, but you might not have the ability or resources to do some of those things. So figuring out, when those little mental breaks can be and what really fuels you and re-energizes you, like Chris said, maybe it's just taking 15 minutes to go for a walk and get some fresh air and feel the sunlight, and figuring out what you need and remembering that it's not selfish to take care of yourself, even if you're a caregiver. You are just as important too. And that guilt as a caregiver, it was what I've heard, can be really real of why am I taking care of myself when this other person needs me more? But in order to care for them, of another cliche, but you can't pour from those empty cups. So making sure you're prioritizing your self-care too. One comment in the chat that I wanted to uplift to that I thought was really great to mention. Someone had said that it's important to answer the question of how am I? A lot of times as caregivers, we're asked how we are and we answer about how our person is instead of how we are. And I think that that's very true, and it just echoes that, your needs are important too. And it's okay to express to those close friends and confidants and supporters how you are doing in the midst of, while also letting them know how who you're caring for is doing, because that's important too, important to share. And sometimes you need to get that out, but not neglecting your own self and your feelings and what you're going through too, and being able to share that with people who are there for you and that are asking. So thank you for that comment in the chat. I know we have this hour is just flying by, and we only have a little bit of time left here together. I want to talk about a few things before we go, just about support and how we can encourage caregivers to ask for help when they need it. I know we've mentioned when people ask, being responsive of that. But how can we encourage caregivers to reach out or to let us know that, their mental health needs support too?
I think that a first step is if you know someone who is a caregiver, someone who's in that role, going back to what you were just talking about, take time and ask how they're doing. Specifically ask how they are doing. Because sometimes we just don't check in with ourselves. And so being able to kind of make that part of the conversation, a regular part of the conversation, yeah, I'm curious about you, your loved one, how are you doing? I think one of the things, and this is not necessarily a caregiver specific thing, but I know oftentimes someone will ask me, can I help you? Are you doing okay? What can I do to assist you? You just kind of look at them like a deer in headlights, and you're like, oh, no, I'm good, but thank you for asking. I think and then, we get an hour later, 2 hours later, 2 days later, and we're like, oh, actually, I could have said this. Here's some things that could have been really helpful. So I think that for caregivers, it can be really hard to share responsibilities and duties. Again, we want to take all of that on ourselves. But making a list of things that you're comfortable with, in terms of, I'm okay with having someone help me out with, an example I used before, that transportation to and from medical appointments, or, helping out with meals, whatever the case may be, anything that's going to be helpful to you, helpful to your loved one, making a list of those things so that when someone asks, it's right there in your head. And also share that list. Share that list with your care team, your network of support, so that they know what they can do to help, because they do want to help. And so I think that's, in terms of getting caregivers to ask for help, I think that's usually a good place to start. But I think that you were exactly right, Jackie, in that there is that sense of guilt when we ask for help, because we feel like, oh no, we need to do it all, or no, this feels selfish, and this is taking away from my loved one. And neither are true. You need support, and it's okay to ask for it.
If you're reaching out to help somebody, a caregiver or a patient, I will tell you, one of the most loving calls I got was a neighbor down the street. I've spent a lot of time with his son as he was growing up, so that was my connection to the family, but not necessarily with the parents. And he is a physician at Scripps, in fact, very high acclaim. He was in charge of the COVID-19 response at Scripps. And he called and said, Mark, we heard about the diagnosis, and Nicole and I, his wife and me, we're here for you and Chris. If you want to go to a Padres game, you call me. You want to take a walk, you call me. You need to go take a ride somewhere, you need some protective equipment, you just call me. So it was, it's beautiful to have a friend call and say, hey, I'm here for you. What do you want? It's a step further if you can say, hey, I'm here for you, and this is what I'm going to do. Is that okay? Or this is what I can do for you. That way, the onus is not on the patient or the caregiver to ask for it. You're offering it. So you might want to keep that in mind if you're reaching out to help somebody.
Mm-hmm. I do think it's healthy to, if you can, to get a therapist to talk to. I didn't have a therapist for a while, and when my girlfriends from college, we talk once a month, would call me and ask me, how are you doing? I would tend to talk about things that are emotionally, upsetting about the whole situation. And I think that Mark feels that that has tainted their relationship with him. So it is better to have a therapist, that you can just, bare your heart to. And I want to say that not everybody can afford sometimes these therapists, but our congressman, for example, sent a flyer to us saying that there are all these free services that you can take part in through the government that might be helpful to people if they need someone to talk to. And Kaiser has support groups that meet weekly for cancer patients, caregivers of cancer patients, etc. So
Don't be afraid to look at the federal government with all the stuff going on in the news. Put that aside. There's some great resources there that are available to you. And I would agree. That's
Yeah, thank you so much, Mark, Chris, and Nicole, for all of those great resources and all the advice and knowledge shared. Um, I know we're right up at the end, and I was gonna sneak one last question in there, but Mark, you kind of answered it in your last answer, so we're on the same wavelength. But someone earlier in the chat had said that they've gotten involved with someone with some chronic pain issues, and knowing what to say has been the hardest thing at times. And so I appreciate you, Mark, for addressing kind of the helpful things that you've come across with friends, of friends who are just consistent about calling and checking in, friends who offer support and resources. And I loved what you said about putting out the offer, and not asking necessarily what you need, but offering something and seeing if it would be something. So it takes that pressure off the patient or caregiver to say, you know, reach out and ask, because sometimes asking, it feels more difficult and you feel like a burden. And so when someone offers it, that just takes one less thing off your plate and allows you to receive that. So thank you. I just wanted to add that in before the end of our time. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
unabashed commercial. And if you really
Yeah.
want to tone and release in your body and you want unconditional love and you don't have one, bring a pet into your life.
Yes.
Make you feel great.
Yes. That is such a great one, such an important one, that companionship, those relationships, the connection. We need support, and caregivers and those being cared for alike. It's equally important. And I just want to say, as we're closing out, immense gratitude for each of you that I have and that I've seen in the chat. Everyone is just really appreciative of your willingness to be here, be so vulnerable, be so open and honest, and share your experiences and what you've been going through and what you've learned over the time. I know it's been very helpful for everyone listening. And just thank you for everyone joining us. We're so appreciative of you being here, for sharing your own stories in the chat. I was reading those as we were going. I appreciate you all for sharing resources, asking questions. It's wonderful to have you here with us. We will be sending out the recording within 1 week. So if you want to share this conversation, I think it was such a beautiful hour we had together, and I hope that more people can learn from it too as we continue to share this message out, as it is November and National Family Caregivers Month. So we want to thank all of the caregivers out there who have joined us today. You are a true blessing. We are so appreciative of everything you do each day for those that you love. So thank you, caregivers. Take some time this month to prioritize your mental health and take that little break. But again, thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Mark and Chris. And thank you all for joining us today. We will be in touch with everyone soon.
Matter.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Thank you, everyone.